Hello, and welcome to Tell Me About Your Book. My name is John Christian. In this episode, I will be speaking with self-published author Kian N. Ardalan. He has written a very detailed fantasy about a world where things go awry, much like the world we live in right now. But his book also offers hope to his readers. Now that sounds pretty cool, so stay tuned. Hi, Kian. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Well,
I'm
my
very
pleasure.
excited.
Oh, that's good. So am I. Now, you live in Vienna, Austria. That's exciting enough for me, but you've also written a book, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that initial part.
Okay. Well, tell me all about your book.
My book is called 11 Cycle. I do have a copy just for showcasing here. It's very thick and beefy, and I'm very, very proud of it. It is dark fantasy, grimdark, if you want to call it that. And it was inspired by a video game. Some of you may know it, Dark Souls. And the way that was inspired, it's very cryptic. It has loose threads of like subplots that are in the background that you can try to deduce alongside the main story plot that you get to enjoy as you would a normal book. And the way I describe it to people is like it's hauntingly beautiful. It is, in many ways, it can be cathartic, but it can also be very, very, for some people, I would imagine it's raw, and that's what a lot of my readers have said to me. It's a lot of raw emotions, and there is a content warning. So maybe, if you go on Amazon or Goodreads, take a look. If it's not for you, I totally understand. Everybody should find something that fits their view of life and what they need to enjoy a good book. And yeah, that's pretty much a summary for now.
Hmm. Well, it's a pretty thick book, and we're going to have to get into it a little deeper. What kind of warning would you give for this? Is this a fantasy?
It is very much a fantasy.
Okay.
And when you say grim dark, that means like the darkest of fantasies where like nothing is off limits,
Oh, I see.
you're talking about matters of descriptive violence in there, and it can also be content warning, sexual assault and stuff like that. However, I will put out the disclaimer that there are grimdark books out there that only have those things in it for the sake of having them. It's gratuitous to a fault. It has no point to it, and it's just there to be a shocking, blunt object with nothing else to provide. I have done my best not to do that. Every single thing that is in the book has a purpose, and it's not there just to be gratuitous. And so far, from every single reviewer that has reviewed it, they've all unanimously agreed that yes, it is tough. If you cannot stomach that, then maybe you should try something else. But that it's never done for the sake of shock value, that there is a purpose behind it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then you have a message that you want to get across to your audience.
I would say so. When I get interview questions sometimes of like, what do you want your readers to feel walking away from this? And I want so one of the main themes of the book is that no matter how dark things can get, no matter how horrible they can get, or how horrible they are, there is still hope, and you can still persevere, and you can still come out the other side. And these characters are supposed to show that no matter how tough it got for them, that they, in a very realistic manner, without undermining the gravity of the things that they experience, they still persevere, that there is still a tomorrow for them. And that's basically what I attempted to do here with the book. And by all accounts so far, people do seem to really be enjoying it. So I'm very happy about that.
We spoke briefly before I hit the record button here. You told me that you come from Iran and that you can speak German and that you are now living in Vienna, Austria. Tell me about your past. Does it come into play into you writing this book? Did you see or experience anything really horrible Or is this something that you just look at generally across the board, the world, and the fact that there are a lot of horrible things going on, and you just want to bring out the hope that people could still have regardless?
That is a very interesting question. It wasn't always easy, respective to like, my classmates. Um, it's funny because my parents, especially my mother, I used to write stories when I was very, very young. And I have very loving parents. And even back then, my mom was seriously considering taking me to a therapist because she had deep concerns about why the parents in the stories kept on dying. And but here's the thing. I think I like to look at the world through not so much a morbid lens, but through a lens of like morbid curiosity. I would say a lot of these themes fascinate me. So within this book, for example, disability is a very, very big theme. And a big problem in fantasy is that disability representation is very lacking or just not adequate. It's a lot of the erasure of the disability through magic. It's a lot downplayment of the disability, or a very much so of like, oh, the person is disabled. They can't like their life is pretty much over. And I wanted to like do a fantasy novel with disability being a very core focus of the narrative. And I think that's what it was kind of a mission for me. So I reached out to people who have disability. They became my sensitivity readers. They pointed me in the right direction of like literature for me to read. And I think that's what it is. I have a very core fascination with people and how people function and their emotions. And I seem to be putting that into my writing.
Now, this fantasy that you wrote, I take it doesn't involve dragons and magic and stuff like that, or does it?
It does. I've had some people describe it as low magic. I'm rather proud of the magic system that I came up with because at its core, every type of magic that there is, and there are three main ones, is based on a sort of either creation or artistic expression. So you have those who are inspired, and any inspired is basically somebody who can conjure magic through their art. If a poet writes a beautiful poem down, and with a sort of intent, maybe that poem is then passed on to soldiers, and it galvanizes them, or it gives them courage. You have musicians who can instill either courage into troops or shrill madness into the enemy. You have dancers who can either strengthen the formation of a battle formation by dancing in the midst of it, or they can conjure any sort of element like fire because of how fierce their snapping movements are. Then you have mist mages who can, create something out of the mist. You have ink or color mages who can use ink to bestow a certain effect that they're looking for. And it's a lot of that. Uh, as for dragons, there used to be dragons. Now there's only one dragon that is chained in the realms, in the realm of the gods. But as like how prominent is the magic, I would say not so prominent, and I would agree with the sentiment that it's probably leaning more towards low magic rather than high. Yeah.
So it's a very thick book. What made you write it so long, and rather than breaking it up, say, into what a lot of people do is maybe a series of books, you just decided to put it all into one? How come?
This is actually book one in the series. I'm planning a minimum of four, if not five. I always, had in my head the vision that I wanted a big tome of a book. And the reason was that even since a young age, having like the paperback and being able to hold that weight in my hand felt like I was holding up the weight of the world. And it added to that experience for me. And I wanted to emulate that as well. The other reason being just because like I have five perspectives in the book, and the more like if you want to give all the perspective enough attention, then it just ends up being a big book. And then there's also the fact that people have said like, hey, as you suggested, maybe you should cut it down into two books. But it turns out in the fantasy scene, if you have a really, really big book like this and then you publish it under Kindle Unlimited, that's actually great because Kindle Unlimited loves big, beefy books. It pays you out more. So that's, if there's somebody listening to this and considering the options, then if you have a big book, Kindle Unlimited, that's a great avenue. Yeah.
Mm. How long did it take you to write that book?
A good question. The first draft was between 5 to 6 months. And in total, with all of the drafts that I went through and everything, it took me 2 years.
Did you have to come up with a whole alternate sense of history and geography? Because history and geography is a very big part of our life here on planet Earth. And whether we realize it or not, we relate everything to history and geography. I live here, you live there. We are consciously aware of how we got to be here and what it means. Did you explain in your book some of the history and geography of your conjured up world?
Absolutely. It is so important. It is so important to make your world feel alive, right? And there was one advice that I heard from Writing Excuses, the podcast, where they said, you don't need to have the entire history of the world figured out. You just need to sprinkle in enough here and there that the reader thinks that you already have it all figured out. And that was great, great advice. I think the history wasn't so difficult. I had a blast during the history and like the different seeds that came before. And I really feel like I wrote like such a rich world that I can eventually start revisiting it all and doing it. And do the previous, the history of the world if I ever decide to expand the universe. But the geography, that's something I struggle with a lot more.
Oh.
That was a lot of, YouTube videos. That was a lot of Wikipedia articles. Just like trying to figure out, okay, how does a mountain form? The village actually needs to have some sort of water resource. So I need to, build it either close to a river or maybe a mountain so that there is potentially a water source underneath. But yeah, it was a lot of that.
Yeah. In my case, I have rivers and some are slow flowing and some have rapids. And even though I kind of know why there's rapids, I had to always Google and ask questions like, why does a river have rapids? Well, because it's slightly going down and it builds up momentum and there's rocks and all this kind of stuff. So it's fascinating when you write about another world, you still have to have water sources. People need water. Most places are built near water, but you've created a world all unto itself. It's all in your head. Did you make words up or use translations for things to mean something other than what they are?
I absolutely made up so many words. So one example is that the mist that encircles the lands in the universe, mortals call it a har. So that's Haar. And the reason I called it that is because there is a place or a cliff in the UK which is constantly surrounded by mist. And I thought that's a cool little thing. And I'm trying to think, what are the words that I personally came up with? That there are certain scenes where there are language, like if it's a race that speaks its own language, I might come up with a specific word for something that they do. So Batar for them was like, for example, the word for warrior, and that's something that they would use, so yeah, sometimes it was, and in those cases I do need to jot those down just to remember, like, this is the word that I use for that.
Okay. I wrote a compendium for my trilogy, and where I not only put all the words I used in alphabetical order and then describe what they are a symbol for, but if it's names of people, I give their ages and a little bit about their personality. I don't know if I went overboard, but compendiums are generally done for novels such as this to help people as a resource of sort. Have you ever considered writing a compendium?
That's a great question. I think it's the kind of thing that if you decide to do it and you know what you're doing, It's a great resource, and I think it's just a great addition to that world. Have I considered doing it? Yes, down the line perhaps, but I don't feel hard pressed at the moment to do such a thing. I think part of the reason is that I want the world itself to be full enough that you can appreciate it as it is, but in certain aspects, vague enough that you can fill in the blanks and theorize on your own how you think those are all connected to each other. And then that was something very important to me with the storytelling of this world, that there are certain mysteries that I want the reader for themselves to decide, like, this is what I think it means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time of this recording, this book is not available. By the time that people see it, it will be. Therefore, I cannot ask you what sales are like. A question I like to ask, but
I can tell you what the pre-orders look like if you're
please
interested.
do.
For ebook pre-orders, I currently, last I checked today, was 410. And paperback orders, which are already being shipped to like bookstores and everything, I have about 100, I think close to 210, I would say. So I'm very, very happy with that so far. Yeah.
Good.
I don't know
Good.
about audiobook yet.
Oh,
That's a tightly kept secret.
is that something you would want to record your voice or not?
Oh, it's done. It's already been recorded.
Oh, come
It's
on. Really?
yeah.
You're a very resourceful person. Wow, that's great.
I
That entire book has been audioed, has it?
Yes, but
Wow.
if anyone's curious, I did the ebook and the paperback indie publishing, but I do have a publisher for the audiobook. My publisher for the audiobook is Podium, and they do this, quite often. They do have deals with authors who are indie publishing, and then they say, "Hey, we'd like to buy the audiobook rights for that."
Okay.
And yeah,
Okay.
but I don't know what the pre-order for that looks like though.
Well, I'll take note of that because that interests me a lot. Kian, it's been a real fascination listening to you describe your book. And I'm looking forward to knowing more about your future exploits. You're saying you're going to write a series. You make sure that when you do write your next book, you contact me and we'll talk more about that.
I honestly cannot wait. I'd love to come back on.
All right. It was a pleasure meeting you, Kian.
Likewise, John. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
And that's our show for today. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to speak with you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.